Hi, I'm Alan. My normal co-host, Dennis Sharon, is taking some time off enjoying a sabbatical from work. His sabbatical is part of a program we've developed at our firm to give our leaders a chance to disconnect, refresh, and come back invigorated. Since Dennis is out, we're going to rotate with some guest interviewers. Today I'm joined by my fellow shareholder, Rachel Godwin, and this week our leadership segment is with Scott Tindle, a local entrepreneur. Scott is the creator of the G.R.I.T Leadership Series. Learn all about Grit, Scott's philosophy behind starting and moving on from businesses, as well as fun stories about his time on Sharktank.
Welcome to Playing Above the Line. We're a podcast that takes a peek into the daily lives of community and business leaders. Each week, we uncover different views of the path to growth, leadership, and achieving success. I'm Dennis Sharon.
And I'm Alan Cave. Dennis and I are both shareholders at Hartman, Blackman & Kilgore. We're a full-service accounting and business consulting firm. As CPAs, we've had the unique opportunity to work with many different leaders and decided we wanted a way to share their incredible stories that we've learned along the way. Rachel, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. Glad to be back guest hosting today.
Well, I'm glad that you keep showing up, so that's always a good thing. It would be kind of boring if I had to do it by myself. So
it would be.
Well, I think that's an indictment on me, but we'll move along. So today's guest is Scott Tindle. Scott, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
We appreciate you taking time to join us. So just start by telling us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing now, and then we'll go from there.
Like you said, my name's Scott Tindle. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've done a variety of different things. Currently, my passion project is something that we call G.R.I.T Leadership. And we're out there trying to help people become better leaders and better teammates by focusing on gratitude, relationships, innovation, and teamwork.
Serial entrepreneur. I like that. I've never heard that term before, but that's interesting in that it connotates the fact that you have done a lot of stuff, right?
It does. Yeah. Kind of the way I define that when someone asks is a lot of the businesses we've started knowing that we were going to be in them for 2 to 4 years, right? So this kind of serial idea of we're going to start it, we're going to build it, we're going to sell it, or we're going to start it, we're going to build it, and if it hasn't reached the momentum we want, we're okay with moving on to do something else. But really, this G.R.I.T leadership is the first one where I've really felt like this could be the next 60 years of my life. Mm-hmm. So
okay.
I'm 38. My grandfather's 98. My great-grandmother lived to be 107. So
you got good genes.
If I can start eating a little healthier, I got a chance to have this thing go for 60 years. And this is really the first one I felt like that. All the other businesses were like, it's a good idea. We can make money. I think we can build it and sell it. What I love is being able to, in those other businesses, being able to provide jobs for people, being able to provide a working environment where they're happy and thriving. And what we're trying to do now is help other people become the leaders and teammates that we believe that can be built on a foundation of gratitude. So we say, if you're not thankful for what you have, you'll never appreciate any blessings you may get in the future. So that's the G for grit. The R is for relationships. As much as possible, everything should be relational and not transactional. The I is for innovation, because creativity is thinking new things, but innovation is actually doing those new things. The important part for us on innovation is having forgiveness for yourself and for your team if you try something new and it doesn't work out. Mm-hmm. Because if you just stop the one time it doesn't work out, you're never going to actually innovate. Mm-hmm. And the T is for teamwork. We say that you need to have self-awareness to know what you're really good at, build a diversity of skills and resources and experiences amongst your team, because if we were all just alike, we wouldn't need each other. And we feel like if you follow this formula, you've increased the likelihood of a successful outcome. Success is not guaranteed. We're just trying to play the odds. If we do these things consistently, then we've increased the odds of a successful outcome. So I just feel super passionate about helping other people with this formula. We call it a success formula. I'd say everybody has to have a personal success formula, but then you need a corporate one. So my personal success formula is grit, kindness, and relentless optimism. Those are my three. And so what we try and teach people is we've identified at least 32 positive character traits. You need to figure out what works for you. But then if you're a business owner or you're in management or you're a teacher leading a classroom, you need to have a success formula for your organization. And if you do that and authentically go tell your story, you're going to attract people who also believe what you believe. And that creates healthier working environments. That creates better relationships and better interdynamics. But it also helps people make more money and save more money. One of the biggest challenges we see is employee retention. I think people have a problem with employee retention because there's unaligned expectations and there's unaligned visions. Mm-hmm. And it's not intentional. We just don't go out and tell the world what we actually believe in. Mm-hmm. So for me, if I go tell the world I believe in a foundation of gratitude, and that doesn't mean I get it right all the time. That's just what I'm trying to build this on. If I go tell them that G.R.I.T is this unique combination of passion and perseverance, and here's what we believe in, I've increased the likelihood of finding employees that also believe what I believe, which will help them want to stay longer, will help them be happier, and will hopefully help us as a company be stronger.
I think you touched on the fear of failure there a little bit when you were talking about innovation and things like that. And I saw something one time that said FAIL actually stands for the first attempt in learning. And I think that's a pretty cool way to look at that, because
Absolutely.
if you're totally scared of failing, you're never going to really try.
Yeah, I don't look at the world in wins and losses.
Right.
I look at the world in wins and learns.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And we can learn from our wins, don't get me wrong, but we have to learn from our failures.
Right.
And so a great friend of mine taught me one time that it's not experience that matters, it's evaluated experience. Mm-hmm. If we go through something, just going through time doesn't teach us anything, but evaluating whatever this thing was and going, how do I make sure I don't do that again? Or what were the missteps here? Where did I fall? Even when I win, sometimes a win wasn't a result of your good decision-making, right? So we talk a lot about decision-based thinking rather than results-based thinking. If you ask somebody, what's the best decision you've made all year? Almost everyone will give you the best result. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily the case. You know, the analogy I use is you can be driving recklessly without your seatbelt on, texting 30 miles over the speed limit. You can make it home safe. You got the result. You got the right result. You just made the bad decisions. Mm-hmm. And that can be flipped on its head, and you can have the wrong result even though you were making all the right decisions. And so if we focus on decision-based thinking, what it helps us do as our team, but then helps other people, we hope, is if you don't get the result you wanted, you can evaluate that. And that's the innovation part, right? You go, all right, we didn't get the result, but what did we think our odds were? I thought it was an 80% chance we'd get this. Okay, well, did we think about this and whatever that input is? No, I didn't think about that. All right, if we'd have thought about that, would that have changed our decision? Yes or no? And so now we are learning from those experiences. And sometimes we nail something and we go, did we create that? Or was that a combination of maybe some relationship we had, some form of luck, some form of, someone else intervening on our behalf? So we might not have made the right decisions, and we might still have got the right result.
Wow, that's interesting. Great insight. I do want to kind of back up and ask a couple of questions. So 38 years old, grit leadership is something that's just kind of developed since, 2018? Is that correct? So I know that you've had a duck boat company, you've had a restaurant, and just all sorts of things. So what brought you to the realization that the world, the community, needed something like grit leadership? So, I mean, what was the genesis of that idea and the jumping off point for that?
So it was really people asking that question. So people said, you've worked in international maritime security, you've run a state fair, you've owned a restaurant, you've owned hospitality and tourism, you've worked in tech, and you've helped in healthcare. How are you finding success in each of these fields? And the answer was, I didn't really know. I'd never really thought about it. I just go out and do life. And so I sat down with our team. We're lucky that a lot of our team has been with us through all these adventures. They've come with us each time. And I said, what is it that gives us a better likelihood of success maybe than someone else, or maybe worse likelihood of success? And we sat around and we said, that's grit. We get involved in projects that we're passionate about, which means we'll persevere. And so Dr. Angela Duckworth literally wrote the book on grit, and her definition is the unique combination of passion and perseverance. If you're passionate about it, you're much more likely to persevere through the hard times and not quit and not give up. So that was the first one. And then we broke that down and said, what is the formula we use every day? Gratitude, relationships, innovation, and teamwork. And that's where grit came from. And I just had enough people ask me that I thought maybe other people would want to learn this as well. And I don't think it's for everyone, because I think everyone needs to pursue a consistent, persistent, best version of themselves. They need to define for themselves what that is, right? I believe this is the right answer, but I believe there are other answers that are also correct. So it's building this authentic kind of tribe of humans that believe what we believe, telling our story, and then people going, I believe that. And if they don't believe that, that's when we actually have some really interesting conversations. You start to get into people who are really good salespeople who don't want to be relational. They're like, I don't have time to be relational. I'm a transactor. And as long as I'm providing value, I don't mind transacting them. That's interesting. I think there's some validity to, as long as you believe in the product you're selling and you believe you're providing value there, blowing through there without having relationships with your clients. That's okay. It depends on the business you're in. That's not what works for us.
Right.
I can't do that. That doesn't fit my personality. I'm the worst transactor in the world. Like, I'm like the worst consultant because I don't charge for it. I just do it for free so much. Yeah. And then, My wife likes to tell me, Alabama Power doesn't get paid on gratitude and kindness. And I'm like, that's a good point. True.
But I think that's part of the fun, is having those conversations and being able to admit that there may be a different story for somebody else, and not, trying to push your thoughts on somebody else.
Absolutely. Especially when we start talking about entrepreneurship or business ownership, it's like, this is not for everybody. Mm-hmm. It is a roller coaster, and it creates emotional instability. You have really high highs, you have really low lows. So for me, the reason I focus on gratitude is that's the fastest way for me to get back to center. Even if I'm too high, sometimes I can be too high, and our team would be like, pump the brakes. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't have the deal done. You know what I mean? Like, that's exciting, but we got to come back to center. Mm-hmm. What we also find is that, back to this relentless optimism in my personal formula, it's like neuroscience tells us that if you're optimistic and positive, you have an increased brain capacity of maybe up to 30%. So if somebody in business said, hey, I can give you a 30% increase in your likelihood of success, and it doesn't cost you a penny, I'm going to take that. Right. But relentless is the important word here, because you can be optimistic, but I know during the course of the day, I'm going to get my head kicked in 10 or 12 times. How do I get back to center as fast as possible and then be relentless in my optimism? Otherwise, you can wipe out a whole day. What I try and do is think about it, is like, all right, if I'm running 15 minutes late to a meeting, that's not good. But what can I do when I'm sitting at this red light? What can I be thinking about to help? Here's 15 minutes. Then the other thing I do when I get to the meeting is I want to say, thank you for your patience, rather than I'm sorry I'm late, right? Because I didn't do it on purpose.
Right.
So I need to show gratitude for them being patient, and also saying you're welcome when someone says thank you. Because if somebody says thank you and you say, oh, no problem, now you've discounted the thanks they're trying. We have to be good receivers of thanks and be good givers of thanks, and not discount people's gratitude for you. I want to generally express my gratitude. And if you bounce that back at me without accepting it, it's not as helpful, and it doesn't provide what we all need emotionally from the experience. And actually, producer Johnny and I learned that from a guy named Jalen Acosta, who's created the Music Entrepreneurship Conference. He's just a brilliant guy. And he was the one that kind of introduced me to that concept of be a thankful receiver of thanks. And that kind of transformed the way I started thinking about that as well.
That's interesting. I mean, you've used the word relationship a lot. Gratitude obviously is important to you. So gratitude, relationships, innovation, teamwork, are they equally important? Does it depend on who you are as to which one takes precedence over the other, or are they on equal playing field in your view?
So for us, at least for me, in my personal philosophy, they start with the gratitude. We have to start with a foundation of gratitude.
Okay.
If we can't get that right, we're going to have trouble going down the R, the I, the T. Okay. Because let's go back to innovation. Something doesn't work. I need to find gratitude in the lesson I learned from this. So that pulls me back to the G. Then when I'm back at G, I go, all right, let me go back to these relationships, because if we don't trust one another, we can't innovate together. Right? They have to trust that when they try something new, you've got their back. And that's back into decision-based thinking rather than results. Like, all right, we didn't get the result. We can make all the right decisions and not get the result we want. So the analogy that I've kind of adapted comes from Annie Duke, who's a former professional poker player. And she tells the story like this. Everybody likes to say that guy's playing chess while this other guy's playing checkers, right? It's supposed to mean you're smarter. But life is not like checkers or chess. Because in that game, a computer can tell you the exact right move every single time. The board is finite. The pieces can only move certain directions. There's an algorithm. That's not life. Life is like poker, right? You've got your cards. I have mine. We know very limited information. Then we start to receive more information as the hand goes. Every time we turn over a card, we get more information. We need to then evaluate those odds every time we have more information. So that is the decision-based thinking. It is okay to say we're going to do something and then 3 weeks later receive more information and say we're not going to do that anymore. And that frustrates teams that don't understand that, especially if you're a leader and they're like, you change your mind all the time. Well, there's new input here. This is why we change our mind. And if you build a team to understand how we make the decisions based on the information we have, it allows for that trust. And then it allows for us to say, all right, what were the percentages of a successful outcome here? Because you're never going to get 100%. Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned earlier about, starting companies, being willing to walk away if it didn't work or moving on to the next thing. I think sometimes that's hard for people to let go when maybe it's not working, or to know when their role has been served to move on to something else. So can you talk about that just a second? You're kind of touching on it with what you're saying.
I think it's really hard, right? I think it's really hard. Nobody wants to, all I talk about is passion and perseverance. Nobody wants to get to the point of perseverance when they don't persevere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But there are some times that it's okay to say the timing may not be right. So the company that I was fortunate enough to take on Shark Tank was a technology company in the access economy. So think of the way Uber and Lyft and Airbnb serve. We did that in the men's necktie space. We were good timing and bad timing, right? The timing can sometimes not be right. So we're good timing that the access economy had not really developed very much. So we were able to gain a lot of market share. We didn't have competitors until very quickly we had competitors. But in the beginning, we did not. That's good timing. The bad timing is because the access economy had just been created, people didn't understand it. So it was incredibly expensive to educate people that it is okay to use a product you don't own and to send it back.
Mm-hmm.
Netflix was doing it in DVDs,
right.
But clothing, I don't know about that. Mm-hmm. So that's good timing and bad timing. Same thing with getting on Shark Tank. That's wonderful. It is a wonderful blessing. The bad timing was we filmed the episode when the company was less than 6 months old. So a lot of the questions, our answers were based on projections. Mm-hmm. And it's hard for someone to invest in that. And Robert Herjavec said, I believe in the concept. I believe in you as an entrepreneur, but you're here too early. We just don't have enough data. Mm-hmm. And my answer to Robert was, well, you just tell me what day to come back, and that's when I'll be here. Because this is the day you told me to be here.
Yeah, right.
And that was one of the big lessons from that. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason that we focus so much on relationships and that relationship capital is so that when the timing's not right, we've preserved those relationships. Mm-hmm. Anybody I do business with, I try and tell them my goal in this is in 50 years, we are still friends. I would rather not do this deal than jeopardize that. And if I focus on that, I'm increasing the odds of successful outcomes later, if I just make that my framework. And sometimes we get it right and sometimes we don't. Mm-hmm. I understand that I'm a polarizing person. Like I am. I'm like, especially people who are cynical. Oh, you can't be optimistic all the time. I'm really not optimistic all the time. I'm just trying to be. I am intentional and purposeful in trying to pursue that because that's what I need to be successful. Other people can be a cynic and be successful. I could never win that way. It's just not in my DNA. I'm just not built for that.
You talked about relationships a lot. Let's talk about somebody who's influenced your leadership, your success, things like that. You mentioned advice that you got on Shark Tank.
I've got some mentors that have come on later in the past few years, but really I go back to two people who are the key foundations of what I do almost all the time. And some of your listeners will know them. One is Dan Brennan, iHeartRadio. Dan and I have been friends for probably 8 years. And he's been on the front row cheering us on. Dan likes to say, I'm here on the front row, but I had no idea that it was going to be this roller coaster, And so Dan has been tremendous for me. And then another is a guy named Colby Cooper, who former chief of staff for Condoleezza Rice and was the chief of staff for the city of Mobile. And Colby and I became great friends. And it's back to relationships and timing. So the way Colby and I even got introduced to one another was I was employee number one at an international maritime security company. We were putting guns and men on ships in the Middle East to protect against Somali-based piracy. I had no idea what we were doing. I'm an attorney by trade. I was trying to figure out the legalities to help us get this company started. And I Googled and found that this guy named Colby Cooper had just moved from the State Department to Fairhope. And I just cold called him. I said, hey, you don't know me. Here's what I'm trying to do. Do you have any advice? He said, what are you doing for lunch? I said, whatever you tell me to do. Same like the Shark Tank. You tell me where to be. Yeah. And we went to lunch, and after about 4 hours, he was able to kind of help me formulate a plan on how the State Department operated and give us this huge jump start, what would have taken me years. I mean, he'd been in the State Department for 10 years. So he was able to translate all that experience to us. And I asked him, because we didn't know each other the first day we met, I said, why are you doing this? Why are you spending so much time with me? He goes, because what you're doing is going to protect American sailors. Why would I not help you? Mm-hmm. And to this day, every adventure he and I have both been on, we have stayed remarkably close to understanding the way that we both go about intentionally trying to do the best we can, knowing that we're both very polarizing.
Well, that is intriguing. So I didn't know you were attorney by trade.
It's been an adventure.
Yeah, that's blowing my mind right now. So, did you ever formally practice law with the firm? Or?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll keep the story short because it's 7 episodes podcast. Here's the very short version. I went to school to be a teacher. So I went to Auburn University, got a degree in secondary education. I wanted to be a teacher and a coach because those were the people who were mentors for me in high school.
Right.
I was not a good student. I almost failed out multiple times. I was almost expelled for truancy. And they consistently drug me back onto the practice field, into school, into class. But for them, we'd be having a much different conversation.
Yeah.
I did that for a few years, realized that was not the world for me. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I had a friend that was in law school, and he said, I think you should consider law school. I think you would really like this academic pursuit of knowledge. You'll love being around all these smart people. I said, okay, I don't know any attorneys. Where I grew up, the only person that had an attorney was if one got appointed for you. So I literally had never met an attorney before I went to law school, which is not the best advice. Like, figure out what the practice of law is about before you go to law school.
Sure.
So I get out, I start practicing law, and I'm doing commercial litigation. And what I found was the only way that we would win and the firm would be happy is if the other side lost. And that's not how my brain works. I want to create deals where everybody wins. It's also, the practice of law is very retrospective. It's what judges have already decided. That's how we decide this. And my brain is going the other direction. I'm going, how do we go create the next new thing? And so that's just not a good fit for traditional legal work. And that's how I ended up in the startup business with this international maritime security company, because I had a law degree, and he called me and asked if anybody, knew how to move men and guns around the world. And I said, I don't think so. He said, neither does anybody else. You want to help me figure it out? And then there we were. Got licensed in countries around the Horn of the Indian Ocean, from South Africa all the way up the east coast of Africa to Egypt, all the way across to Qatar, down to Sri Lanka, the Maldives, and learned a lot, really. We had some losses along the way, sure. Those were our learns, but we had a bunch of wins.
That's amazing. So that was your first business. How many businesses do you think you've started over the years?
15.
So what's the favorite? Grit leadership. Let's take that. I know that's your passion, but so other than grit, what's something that really had your attention, had your heart there for a little while?
When we started the Ducks, I loved it. I loved this concept of creating tourism in a new way and creating this fun adventure for our guests, and literally being able to take something from non-existent to the TripAdvisor list of the top tourist attractions in the country in 18 months, and working with people who were just as passionate as I was about entertaining people, showing them our community, showing it to them in a new way, and trying to transform tourism. For me, that was the one that was most fun. But that's also because I got to be there from the very beginning on the creation side. Yeah. And I love storytelling. I'm not a very good storyteller. I'm learning it. I try and learn it because it's important to what we do. But for me, that one was really fun. Ty tried the technology company we took on Shark Tank. I didn't really care. Honestly, it was a good idea. And that's one of the lessons I learned. Damon John said, I like the concept. I like you, but I don't see a passion for this at all. And I told him he's right. I just, on the show, I said, you're right, Damon. I don't have a passion for fashion. These guys are renting ties. If they had a passion for fashion, they'd be out looking at, fashion magazines trying to figure out the next season style.
Right.
The other lesson I learned, and this is something I've carried forward, is Mark Cuban. So we get 50% offer from Kevin O'Leary. He said, all you got to do is get a second shark on board, and I'm in. Damon goes out. We spend about 30 minutes talking to Mark Cuban, and I feel like we're getting really close. Like, I feel like we've got a good shot. You're actually in the tank anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. They edit it down to what you see on the show.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And he said, all right, Scott, what are we going to do when we're crushing it? And this thing is making $20 million a year. And I hesitated probably a fraction of a second. In my mind, it felt like 30 minutes, but it was a fraction of a second. And before he even finished that sentence and before I could answer, he said, you got to think bigger. He said, I'm not interested in investing in a $20 million company. I want to invest in a $200 million company. And I don't think you're ready for that. And so that's part of the takeaways, right? Timing from Robert. You got to have passion. That's what Damon taught me. What I learned from Kevin is there will be people who are in if somebody else is in. Mm-hmm. Right? There's plenty of people that go, prove it to me and win, then I'm in. I don't want that. Like, I'm grateful for the experience, but I don't know that Kevin and I would have been very good business partners because I don't do well with people that go, prove it to me and then I'm in. That's the easy road. Mm-hmm. And so, but I get that now. I get people now, hey, prove grit leadership is what you believe the vision can be, and I'm in. Well, I will welcome them in, but it will be on vastly different terms because we want everybody to be a part of this movement that believes in it.
The duck boats are still going, right? I mean,
they are.
Okay, yeah.
So sold all those, had a collection of mobile-based businesses, sold to my business partners in order to pursue G.R.I.T full-time all the time because I was just so passionate about it.
I mean, gosh, we could sit here and talk for 3 hours, and we don't have 3 hours. But let me ask you this. So podcasts, books, authors, anything that has made an impression on you as far as your leadership theory or ideas, or as far as how you conduct yourself business-wise? I mean, do you have anybody you can point to there?
Yeah, so in the retail and guest service hospitality space, it's definitely Lee Cockrell. He's former vice president of Disney. Basically was the idea behind creating the Disney Institute.
Okay.
I got a chance to go down there and study at the Disney Institute and then meet Lee, and he's become a mentor that I can lean on from hospitality and guest service stuff. In the world of kind of entrepreneurship, there's a guy named David Meltzer who's become a mentor for me, and he's a part of what we do through G.R.I.T Leadership. And he is really helpful on the mindset side, understanding the mind. There's a guy named Dr. Jim Brennan, who's actually Dan Brennan's brother, and he's one of the world's leading psychologists in human performance. And he has been incredibly helpful. He's got a wonderful book out called The Art of Knowing Oneself, and it's all about mindfulness and using mindfulness to be a better leader in person. Those three folks have been tremendous. But then I just try and consume as much as I can and be intentional about what I'm consuming. So like people have their favorite TV shows. I don't really do well with that, like because I'm just trying to consume what I can consume. So I'm listening to podcasts, or I do watch shows like Tillman Fertitta's show, $1 Billion Buyer and things like that, things where I can learn from that. But that's just how my brain works. You like what you like. I got a lot of friends that like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. That's okay. That's not wrong. This is like what is good for you. And that took some learning for me. That was like one of the really hard lessons I've had to learn. It's like, I don't understand why you would like this. And then I realized somebody gave me this analogy with esports. I was like, I don't understand. People just sit and watch other people play video games. And they're like, how often do you sit and watch other people play football? Oh, yeah, good point. I'm not on the field playing. I'm watching these other people play. That's the fascination for them. Except these people watching esports, they're trying to learn tips and tricks. They're trying to learn to be better at their craft, just like I listen to podcasts to try and learn to be better at mine. Mm-hmm. So having the realization of understanding, like, you like what you like. Everything's different. That really frees you up to not get into this negative space of trying to judge somebody else's decisions.
Yeah, well, it gets back to, I saw something on some little meme or something today, but it's worry about why you're worrying about what I do. So it's like, hey, you do you, let me do me, and everybody.
I've got enough of my own problems,
right?
Like, I need to spend as much time trying to fix me. I don't have time to fix everybody else.
Amen, brother. I've asked this question before, but as we wrap up, I do want to ask this of you because I'm interested to know what your answer is. But everything that you've done, you've seen, you've been involved in and with. If you could go back and tell 18-year-old Scott one thing to help him in his life, based on what you've been exposed to and learned to this point, what would that be?
That's a really great question. I try and think about these things all the time. One, I wouldn't have any regrets. I don't have any regrets about the things we've done. So I wouldn't say, hey, you should do this differently. Mm-hmm. That would I'll totally alter your life if you live like that. I think one of the things I would do for 18-year-old Scott would be think bigger. Get involved with things that you're passionate about. Figure out what you're passionate about. I didn't know when I was 18 years old what I was passionate about, but I think I was thinking really small back then. Because how can a kid who grows out way out in the county, who comes from a family whose dad is a schizophrenic disabled veteran, go do some great big thing? You can. But I had put myself in that little box. Yeah. Nobody else put me there. That was me. But you got to have those experiences. And I probably would have said, travel. Literally get in the car and travel and save every penny you can to then go travel again. Because a lot of what happened for me was in between teaching and law school. I knew I was going to law school, but I was on a track. It takes a while to get in. And I went and worked this job for a software company where they literally flew me around the country to go teach people how to use this computer software. And I got to go to LA and Tampa and Philly and New York and see these things at 23 years old that really I started going, oh, they do this here. They do that there. One of the things I've learned about the way my brain works, and Dr. Brennan taught me this, he said, kind of my uniqueness is I can take unrelated things and see new ways of putting them together. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the only way to do that is to go see all these other things. So we haven't really invented anything. There's no such, we haven't invented anything. We've taken these concepts and put them together in new and unique ways. Mm-hmm. We take other people's models, put them together.
So if someone wants to learn more about G.R.I.T leadership, where can they go?
So Best place to go is gritleadershipseries.com. We're always updating that with future events. Producer Johnny and I are also launching the Grit Leadership podcast that'll be out very soon with some great, amazing guests. The first episode actually has Gary Vaynerchuk, David Meltzer, and Champ Bailey on it, Hall of Famer. So that's going to be fun. But the other thing is they can just sign up for our email list. Just go to gritleadershipseries.com. We're always sending out more information. This is an ever-evolving, what we say is movement, right? We tell people to join the movement. I have no idea what it's going to look like in 3 months, but I'm really excited about it.
Well, I will tell you that I like to think that my 17 and 19-year-old listen to my podcast. I'm sure that they don't listen to all of them, but this will be required listening for them. Scott, thank you so much.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I really appreciate y'all being here, and it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to getting to know everybody better and just seeing where the world takes us.
Appreciate you being here. Thanks, Scott.
To learn more about Grit Leadership Series, please visit www.gritleadershipseries.com or click the links in the show notes to learn more about their social media pages.
Well, thanks for listening to our podcast today. To never miss an episode, subscribe to Playing Above the Line at iTunes and anywhere else you get your podcast. And be sure to leave us a rating. We'd love to know what you think about our show.
To contact us or to stay connected, follow us on social media at HBKCPAS on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.